Hi everyone, my name is Megan Jones and I'm a current LPN to BSN student at Indiana State University. Today I have for you my fourth video in a short series of health education videos, and our topic for the day is osteoporosis. So before we get started today, I'd like you to take a brief pre-test that I made for you. You can go ahead and pause the video and you'll find the link attached to the comments in the video. So before we really get started and delve into the topic of osteoporosis, I want you to look at our learning objectives and what I'd really like you to take away from today's video. I'd like you to be able to define what it means to have osteoporosis, like what is it, what defines it, explain risk factors that increase the likelihood of developing osteoporosis, be able to identify signs and symptoms that are associated with it, identify lifestyle modifications that can help reduce the risk of development or help to keep the symptoms at bay. Also, describe ways to modify your house to prevent falls if you do have osteoporosis, and explain different treatment options. So our population at risk, the population that we're really concerned about, and we want them to be more informed about osteoporosis, are those both male and female aged 50 years and older. Now I know typically they might say screening starts at 65 and it's really important for postmenopausal women, but osteoporosis can affect people younger than 65. It can affect both men and women, so we want to make sure we're reaching more people. So let's take a look at what osteoporosis really means. It's a condition that affects your bones, where the bones become even more porous than normal. The holes that are already in your bones, they get progressively bigger. That's going to result in a loss of bone mass and decreased strength. Normally, your bones are already porous, and they resemble something similar to the holes in a sponge or a honeycomb. And if you look at the picture here, the normal bone has some holes in it, but they're definitely a lot smaller than the bones of someone who has osteoporosis. As the bones weaken, there's an increased risk for sudden bone fracture or bone breaks, and that can be during just normal activities of daily living, like walking or standing up. And the bones most at risk for fracture are the wrist, hip, ribs, and spine. So what are the functions of the bones? The bones serve several very important purposes for your body, and that's going to include protecting your vital organs. It's going to provide support and structure to your body. It's going to store calcium, and there's a process called bone remodeling where bones are broken down and rebuilt when calcium is needed. And it's also going to store minerals. All right, everyone, so now we're going to take a look at some numbers that go along with osteoporosis. Worldwide, they suspect that nearly 200 million people are thought to be living with it, 54 million of which actually live in the United States. Now, unfortunately, women, they're 4 times more likely than men to develop osteoporosis, and 1 in 2 women and 1 in 4 men will have fractures that are related to it after age 50. And they suspect that there's going to be about 2 million fractures every year that are related to osteoporosis. Now, a little bit about the bone. Your bone is constantly breaking down and building back up, and that's, due to the functions of the bone in the body, the storage of calcium, all that kind of stuff. But normally, the rate at which the bone is broken down and built back up, it kind of goes hand in hand. It can keep up with each other. Well, after age 35, the rate of bone breakdown occurs more rapidly than it's able to build back up. And this occurs at an even faster rate after menopause, which puts women, more at risk, like we've said here. When it comes to risk factors, there are several risk factors that increase your risk of developing osteoporosis. The 2 main ones are going to be age and gender. As your age increases, so does your risk. Gender, we had talked about, females are a lot more likely than the male population to develop osteoporosis, and that's in part due to being postmenopausal because of the decreased estrogen production. Having a family history of osteoporosis, your ethnicity can play a part in that too. Having a lower body weight or a thin and petite frame, having pre-existing health conditions such as different surgeries, organ transplant, bariatric surgery, medications, certain steroids, and hormone treatments can also increase your risk as well. So for signs and symptoms, typically early on in the disease process, most people don't realize that they have osteoporosis because there's not a lot of signs and symptoms happening to them. But as it progresses, that's when they start to notice, and those symptoms can include bone fractures, lower back pain, posture changes, loss of height. If you see our little guy here, he starts out normal and fine, but then as the disease progresses, he's losing height and his posture is changing. There's decreased and weakened grip strength. Your nails can become brittle and weak. You can experience shortness of breath, and that's because as your spinal discs become more compressed, it's not allowing for your lungs to fully expand, and there's receding gums. Osteoporosis can cause long-term effects on your body. It can cause you to have increased pain, chronic pain, and that can lead to difficulty performing activities of daily living. It can cause disability, it can cause your quality of life to become decreased. You're more at risk for bone fractures or complete bone breaks, and when that happens, that can increase your risk of pneumonia, blood clots, infection. When it comes to diagnosing osteoporosis, bone density scans are the preferred diagnosis method, and there's different options available, but one that they typically prefer to use is called a dual energy X-ray absorption scan. That's also called a DEXA scan. Now what that does is it measures your bone mineral density, and that predicts the likelihood of having a fracture. Now if you're interested in finding out your risk of fracture, you can check out the link below for the fracture risk assessment tool, also known as FRAX, and that provides you with a 10-year probability of having a major fracture. As with many things, the first line of treatment is usually lifestyle modifications, and that can be dietary changes, making sure you're increasing that calcium and vitamin D intake, getting enough protein, exercising. Now, if that's not helping, there are medications available, and that's going to include oral medications and injections. I know it seems like there's a lot of factors that you can't control when it comes to developing osteoporosis, but there are definitely some lifestyle modifications that you have control over, and that's going to include leading an active lifestyle. Don't be sedentary. Having good eating habits, making sure you're including enough calcium and vitamin D in your diet, consuming alcohol in moderation, and avoiding tobacco. When it comes to exercising to help prevent or manage symptoms of osteoporosis, it's always good to include some weight-bearing activity because that helps to strengthen your muscles and your bones, as well as getting some balance and coordination exercises in because that's going to help with your walk, help you have a steady gait, reduce your risk of fall and serious injury. And below there, we have a list of some beneficial exercises for you. When it comes to living with osteoporosis, a top priority is going to be preventing slips, trips, and falls because they can cause potentially serious injury and bone fractures. Now, the following tips, they can help you with that, and that's going to include removing tripping hazards such as loose cords, wires, or throw rugs, or making sure they're very secure. Wear sturdy shoes, soles that have good grip on them. Use assistive walking devices such as canes and walkers. Install grab bars in the bathroom and maybe apply a non-skid mat in your bathroom as well. Use night lights in your bedroom, your hallway, your bathroom, and ask for help when needed, such as lifting heavy items or carrying items up and down the stairs. I know we've covered a lot of good information here today on osteoporosis, but the next two slides I have here for you, they have some additional resources if you have some more questions. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the links are there to all of them. I will point out a couple, such as the American Bone Health website. They are actually an online community for those living with osteoporosis. It's a online resource for you to connect with people who are going through what you're going through, and it's a nice way to connect to people that might not be in your neighborhood or even your state. Another thing I wanted to point out is the My Plate. That has sources of calcium for you if you're trying to increase your dairy intake, and it also has some useful information if you're allergic to dairy products and you need some non-dairy alternatives. You can look at that. And the FRAX, which is the fracture risk assessment tool we talked about earlier, you can follow that link to assess your risk as well. And here I just have my resources. Again, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this presentation. If you can take that pre-test that you took before we started and see how you do now, I'd appreciate it.